we'll bring him officially on stage and see if our technology works once and for all. And Derek, thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks for the invite. I appreciate the opportunity I love IFS, so I appreciate any opportunity to talk about it. Thanks, John.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually discovered you through a place where I spend way too much time, which is YouTube. That's how I learn about everything in life now, whether it's like, did I do my taxes wrong or what is IFS? So I found an episode of you doing a live session with Tammy Sullenberger, who now is also my IFS consultant, and she's teaching my group practice IFS, and then I'm in your program, Stepping
Uh,
Stones, and but I have to tell you that video and seeing you do the model was just, first of all, incredible, and obviously very generous for Tammy to offer, to be a client in that session. But just to see the model live in action, it was just such a wonderful way to try to understand it. And it seems like that's a very IFS thing, is that a lot of times the teaching is through experiencing it.
yeah. One of my students once said to me, the difference between practicing it and reading about it is the difference between watching the Olympic swimmers and then diving in the pool, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you got to get in there.
I'd love for you to maybe fill us in a little bit more, just kind of, who you are and how you got here. I've heard a bit of your story about how you came to IFS, but I'd love to hear a little bit of that for our audience, and then we'll get into our topic at large here.
Sure. Yeah, I went to a retreat about 20 years ago down in Mexico. And when I got there, saw this guy called Dick Schwartz, who's the founder of the model. And he was in a yurt surrounded by women. And my first thought was, oh God, I've stepped into a cult. Now I'm going to spend a week with group therapists. I don't even like therapists, and it's a cult. So I later realized my protected parts were all up around this. And then about halfway through the week, I softened a lot. Had the opportunity to be a subject of a demo with Dick Schwartz, which was transformative, that one session. And then came home. I was so excited. It's like, this is the thing, right? So I've got very skeptical parts, and they were kind of
Yeah.
irritated because they were looking for like where it doesn't fit, but it seems to fit. So went to Best Buy, got a video camera, made a cheesy little video called Understanding the Personality System, got a YouTube channel, because at the time there was nothing on YouTube. And I thought, this is important. We've got to get this out, And then I took the camera back because you can have it for 14 days and not pay for it, which I thought was a good deal. I just been to Mexico. Mexico is
Yeah.
expensive. Yeah. And then I discovered I like making videos. It's my preferred way to teach because it's quick and it's clear and it reaches people. And writing a book is laborious, so this is my preferred way to get the information out there. So
Yeah.
yeah, made a bunch
No,
of
I
them
love
since.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, you have a great, selection between both demos and also more kind of didactic, or talking about the model. You have a series where I think it was another therapist, maybe kind of a friend of yours.
Hmm.
Maybe she's from the UK. I can't remember. Who is kind of interviewing you about IFS, but it's a really nice series,
Yeah.
broken up
Yeah.
into different topics.
Yeah, that's the IFS for Therapists series, speaking to some of the aspects of the model. Yeah, there's also another one which has so much fun doing where I play the client and the therapist. And when I'm the therapist, I've got this long beard. And when I'm the client, I've shaved it. And it's just so fun. I ran around the house with a step ladder and same camera. I'm trying to do all these things. But it was to give a sense of what a session might look like, how it could flow. Yeah.
That's great. One time when I was in fifth grade, I was running for class president, and I had the idea to interview myself in two characters. And I had a golf cap, and I would wear it forward, and I would speak in a really bad British accent. And then I would flip it around and be like the kid.
Yeah,
And people loved it, and I won. So
yeah.
maybe some early parts work there. Who knows?
I think we got the same part, except for my accent is genuine. That's the only
Yeah,
difference.
exactly. I have to ask, I'm always curious about how you ended up in Canada, and yeah, how life brought you there, if you don't mind.
Oh, well, I first came when I was 17. I wanted to travel. I didn't want to go to the States because it's
Uh-huh.
the States, and uh, and I wanted to go somewhere where I could speak English and be understood because my languages are not good. So Canada made sense. And I came to
Mm.
Toronto. I was 17. I stayed at the YMCA for 2 nights. It was horrible. I looked through the paper and I found a room in a shared house downtown, and I went to see it. And there were 5 young people in the house between 20 and 30. And they gave me the room, even though I was just there for 5 weeks, and they kind of adopted me. And I got to live like a young Canadian, not in his parents' home,
Yeah.
downtown Toronto, and thought I am going to move here one day. So I got my free education first in England, and at the end of
Smart.
that, it was stay in England with Margaret Thatcher or go to Canada. So guess what I did?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Great. I can imagine where you live is quite beautiful. I can always see this, like, glimpse of a tree behind you in your house there or wherever you are.
I'm in British Columbia.
Okay.
I'm actually on top of a mountain in British Columbia. It is. It's beautiful. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
sounds ideal.
Yeah.
Um, well, yeah, let's talk about the model a bit. I mean, just wherever you wanna
Sure.
begin. Like I said, this is a new series for our podcast, but, so therapists may have an idea of what IFS
Uh-huh.
means, what it stands for. Some might be totally new to it. If you don't mind just kinda bringing us into the basics, and then we can talk about, yeah, we'll find our way into it.
Yeah, so Dick Schwartz developed the model in the 80s initially, and IFS stands for Internal Family Systems. He was a family systems therapist, and he realized, got this clarity when working with his clients, when they talked about a part of me feels like this, a part of me feels like that. He's like, wait a second, what if these parts are real? And what if they're organized internally in the same way that external families get organized? And he started asking them about their parts. Discover that indeed the psyche is multiple. We all have a bunch of parts, and we know this intuitively. If I said to you, John, hey, do you want to meet for lunch on Friday? You might say, part of me does, part of me doesn't. We do that all the time. We just haven't noticed that we do that all the time. And then all these different parts of us that have different roles. On top of that, at our core is what Dick called our self, because his clients were saying, well, that's just myself. And that self consistently has the same qualities in all of us: compassion, curiosity, calmness, courage, creativity, connectedness, a couple of other C words. And what it boils down to for me is kindness. Right. And
Oh,
so here's an example of that. If you, John, or any of the listeners here, you step outside after this, you look down your street and you see there's maybe an 8-year-old kid who's crying, like sobbing into their hands. You look around, there's no other kids around, there's no other adults around. John, what's your impulse when you see that kid?
yeah, go right to them, comfort them, get down on their level, eye contact, just
Hmm.
yeah, just to help and be there.
Yeah, find out what's going on, right?
Yeah,
So what are you doing there? You're being calm, you're bringing your curiosity and your compassion to that vulnerable being. That's who you are. That's simply who you are at your core. Now, for many years in the mental health field, a guy called Winnicott um, posited that you needed to have good enough parenting to have those kind of qualities. You have to learn them from being well parented. And what Dick clued into was that no matter what's happened to you, no matter what the level of trauma, at your core, this is who you are. Now, that can be covered up by the different parts of you, but at your core, that's who you are. So when we're calling this a non-pathologizing approach, the very fact we have to call it that tells you that the mental health field has had decades of pathologizing us.
yeah,
What's wrong with you? Where's the disease? But what if there's nothing wrong with you? What if there's nothing wrong with you or me or any of us? That's where we start with IFS, and it's
yeah.
brilliant because it's accurate.
You all, IFS talks a lot about the paradigm shift, and that just continues to kind of floor me in terms of the position that IFS takes with the person and how we're made. And if someone comes in and they say, you know what, I'm here because, um, I know that I drink too much and my wife says I drink too much, or I went to 12 step and they said, yeah, you're an addict, and you'll always be an addict, or whatever it is. And they come in with all that heaviness, all that shame. And of
Yeah.
course, in IFS, we would say they're blended with all these parts.
Yep.
Sometimes what I'm finding in my clinical work is, and still being new to the model, is just starting there with the unblending piece, right? So there's a part
Hmm.
of you that really likes to drink, right?
Right.
Or there's a part of you that gets angry and raises
Yep.
your voice, right? And then you feel really bad about it, right?
Yep.
How do you feel toward that angry part? right? Can you
Uh-huh.
can you can you find that angry part right now and just invite it all the way up? Like, why would I want to do that, right? I'm here to get rid of that part.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah, so what we would say then is, oh, the part of you that wants to get rid of that part, would it be okay with that one if we just got to know it? Because what we know is every single part of us, no matter what it's doing, has a positive intent, including, now this is going to sound odd, including suicidal parts, parts that are
sure.
actively suicidal. And if someone's listening to this, it might be like, how the hell could that be a positive intent? If you ask it, if you just get curious about these parts, the suicidal part will usually tell you it is aware of other parts in the system holding so much pain, so much emotional distress, so much trauma, that life is really just about pain and the occasional escape from it.
Yeah,
And the suicidal part really could be seen as operating out of compassion itself, right? It's like, let's end the pain, even if it means ending the system. And once that part is respected and understood, it will often back off if it believes there's another option. IFS gives us the other option, which is that what we call yourself or your self energy. You bring that to the part holding the pain. And parts holding pain are usually kids that were hurt, sometimes deeply hurt, and there was
yeah,
no one around to witness that hurt. So a part holds the hurt. When as adults, we can come to that part in our own system. So this isn't your job as the therapist to fix me, right? A, I'm not broken, and B, it's not your job. But you guide me to coming into that part, and I can say, hey, what happened? What happened? How come you feel so badly? Who told
mm,
you you were unlovable or whatever it's holding, right? And when it's witnessed now by me, it can release that pain, which means the protective parts can step down. And that part is a lot more happy and it's not going to get triggered anymore because we've cleared the pain. That's what we're doing with this work. And it's a very, very beautiful and accurate understanding of the human psyche.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just a total convert. It's ridiculous. I've been doing therapy for 12 years, and never have I found a model that feels so, complete and so gentle and so genuinely honoring of the client, of humanity, and that,
Humanity,
what if
yeah.
you actually do have what it takes inside of you to heal yourself?
Yeah.
And it's also been a tremendous relief for me personally. I took like a year and a half sabbatical from doing clinical work, just reached absolute burnout
Hmm.
point of kind of being the attachment figure for
Right.
20 people a week, right? And I
Hmm.
was trained psychodynamically, so everything that's happening is about you and me, right? And so if you've got anger issues, I got to get you eventually to be angry with me, and then I can be warm and empathic, and hopefully you internalize that and take it out in the world. But I've got to take your anger for 9 months to get there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the
Yeah,
irony is, if you're warm and empathic to my angry part, another part of me will go, "Oh, I can be angry and I can be met with warmth and empathy." But the original angry part might not have that experience at all because they're different parts, right? So,
totally,
yeah.
totally.
I want to comment as well,
Yeah.
John. You talked about unblending. So blending is when a part fully takes us over. So, I am angry. That's a part.
Mhm.
Or I am sad. That's a part. We know it's a part because it doesn't have those qualities of self. But that unblending piece all by itself, I want to share with you. I have 3 videos on my YouTube channel on understanding shame, which is not you, how it gets taken on, and how we can clear it because it's not innate,
Mm.
but it's all over the place because we've all been shamed by our parents. It's a common parenting tool, right? Um, so anyway, I made these 3 videos. They're free for people to access, and there's a meditation to help clear the shame. Um, Very good feedback on those. But I got this email a couple of years ago from a guy he wrote, "I am crying as I am typing this to you. I'm 50 years old. My entire life, I believed at my core there's something wrong with me and I'm unlovable. And now knowing that that is held by a part of me, I cannot tell you the relief." He hasn't done any therapeutic work. He hasn't come, but just knowing that that's only a part of me and not my totality for this man he revisited 50 years of his life. And it's remarkable, just that one piece. What happens when we recognize that that is held by a part of us? So I wanted to share that with you because
Yeah.
it's so powerful, just that.
It's incredible, and, I just started with a new client recently who, the one liner is like client with anger issues, right?
Mhm.
Um, and in our very first session, we just worked with, again, inviting that angry part to be here. Can we get to know it a little bit? Can we ask it what it's trying to do for you?
Right.
This is where it
Yeah.
gets really interesting,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Guess what protectors try to do? They try to protect using the one
Uh-huh.
tool they often have, right?
Yeah.
Which is anger. Get people to
Uh-huh.
back away from me,
Mhm.
right? Because it's something is about to go wrong, right? Okay, well
Right.
that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And about how old is that part? How old does it think you are, right? Just really gently, just kind of exploring there, right? Basic stuff.
Uh-huh.
But that externalizing or that unblending, right, is um, was enough for her to go, I've been to 10 different therapists my whole life, and she's had a classic experience where she comes in and they go, "All right, you got anger issues. We gotta get rid of this anger." Right.
Yep.
So what do we do? This kind of top-down approach of
Uh-huh.
like breathing or DBT skills, or maybe more mindfulness, or when you feel anger, snap a rubber band on your wrist, whatever it is. And it's like, that is a lot of therapy, right? And I've done a lot of those things too, very well intending of like,
Yeah, yeah.
let's tamp down this ugly anger, right? Before
Yeah.
it really screws your life up, before you
Yeah.
really yell at your kids. Like you've yelled at them a little bit, like we don't want you to really yell, or like
Right.
that's where a lot of the work starts and that's where a lot of it stays, right? And then that
Yep.
experience of like something's really wrong with me and I got to get rid of this part of me. And guess what? The
Yeah.
part is like they don't like that either, right? And
Yeah.
so we go in and we're actually not trying to get rid of you. We're trying to understand
Mhm.
kind of how you got here and how you took on this role and the fears you have around what if I didn't do it? What if I didn't turn on the anger?
Right.
What might go wrong?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's, back to that every single part has a positive intent, right? What's the positive intent of your angry part? You ask if you hypothetically, if you didn't respond with anger, what might happen? And here's a possible scenario. You go to work every day, you have to go to work every day, you got to bring in the money, and your boss, for whatever reason, shames you every day, humiliates you in front of the other staff every day. And it lands on a part of you that was maybe shamed when you were a kid that feels all of that, the feelings that a kid will hold. And so, you know, quote unquote, I have explosive anger at my boss. What's wrong with me? And the tragedy of therapy is well-meaning therapists will agree, oh yeah, there's something wrong with you. And there isn't,
Yeah, and there's a
right? You've
code
got,
for it in a big book.
oh yeah, and big pharma will make lots of money like fixing it for you. It's like, no, get to know the angry part. Who are you protecting? A vulnerable 5-year-old. Could I hear what happened to the 5-year-old so it gets witnessed and it can release it? Once that's gone, the boss will still keep shaming, but it won't land on the same trigger, and there'll be no need for the angry protector to come up. And that angry protector is usually reactive when a part's been triggered that has some vulnerability. The other side of it are the proactive parts that want to make sure that that part, for example, doesn't get triggered. So if it's a part that feels like it's no good, how can we make sure it doesn't get triggered? Very commonly, we'll see the people pleaser. Every single person you meet, you have to pull in some positive energy. You become a chameleon so that they like you. So there's no risk that the part of you that feels
Mhm.
like it's not okay is going to get triggered. That's exhausting. Every
Yeah.
single person you meet. Or the perfectionist. If I just get everything right under all circumstances, I will not be criticized because criticism means there's something wrong with me. So, these are very
Yeah.
common protective parts. And like I say, they get exhausted.
Yeah.
And when we're able to come to the part that, for whatever reason, has picked up messages about not being good enough, witness it, help it clear it, then I don't need to be the perfectionist. And I don't need to be the people pleaser. I can keep those skills because that part of me has those skills and they can be very helpful. You're going for a job interview, you want your people pleaser right up there. But not
Sure.
every time I see another human being, right? That's just too much.
Yeah. Yeah. So to go further with that, so these protector parts operate in part based on the assumption that if a more vulnerable part that is oftentimes very wounded, and like you said, oftentimes can be quite young. In other words, an exile part,
Hmm.
an exile part can't handle what's about to happen, or can't handle right the experience of shame, and so we got to do
Hmm.
something about it, right? Either
Hmm.
prevent it altogether
Hmm.
in being
Right.
perfectionistic, or never having flaws, right?
Hmm.
Or in the case of firefighters, it might look a little bit different, right? In terms of that response to shame or perceived shame, like something shaming's about to happen, so they jump
Hmm.
in. Can you
Yeah,
say more about that dynamic?
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got the protective system comes in two halves, if you like. The ones that are proactive, let's try and make sure that doesn't get triggered. When it does get triggered, which is inevitable, um, if you just imagine going into work for a moment and your boss says something, demeaning to you, if you didn't have your protective part, that part that just got triggered that feels the shame would begin to take over your whole body. And you'd be consumed with like a 5-year-old shame, right? And so your body would kind of cave in a bit. You couldn't make eye contact. You'd probably be frozen on the spot. You'd probably go red. You hate going red, so you go more red. You wish the earth would swallow you. You might start to cry. That's not safe. That's not safe, particularly in that environment or in very many environments. So to prevent that happening, that's when what we call the firefighters come in. They distract from that emotional fire. Anger, if it's available to you, is a very common one. You might decide you can hang out till lunchtime, but then you're going to go to the bar. You might sneak out and smoke a joint. You might go to the slots on the way home and do some gambling. You might suddenly get very tired. You might use food, right? Binging and
Mhm.
purging food. This is more common with usually a young women's demographic, but you might cut to
Mhm.
relieve the emotional pain. Many of these activities are not socially supported. They're kind of frowned upon, right? So the manager parts of us that like to manage our lives, like the perfectionists and the people pleaser, they want us to look good. They're very concerned with social mores. When the firefighters do their reactive, immediate thing, they don't make us look good. Right? So that's when you hear in your head, why the hell did you do that? What's wrong with you? Well, I had every right to be angry, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And you'll hear them fighting inside your own head, right? And that's, we call that a polarity, but when those guys are going at it, the part that we don't attend to is that 5-year-old that feels like it's not good enough. And that's the gift of this, is recognizing when those extreme behaviors are occurring, that they're coming from parts that are extremely protected because there's a part in extreme distress. And that's where we go. So when I make a bold statement like there's nothing wrong with you or me or any of us, many of the people listening to this will say, oh, he doesn't know me. He doesn't know the things I've done. If you come to the part that did those things and you ask it how it was protecting you, it will have an answer. So we could even go to the example of Trump, right?
Mhm.
I don't know what happened to that man's childhood, but I can guess, because what I do know about him is he's achieved, if you like, the highest position possible in the land, and it's not enough, which means he's not enough, which means there's a little boy inside of him, whatever that boy picked up, he's not good enough. And his protector has taken him to this place where you can't go any higher, really. And he still doesn't, at his core, feel like he's good enough, because that's not the answer. The answer is to come to that little boy and say, hey, sweetie, who told you you weren't good enough? What happened? If he was able to do that, he wouldn't be acting out in all of these frankly horrific ways. And I realize that some of your listeners are going to be Trump supporters, but I got to speak what's true for me, right? Looking at the United States from Canada, it's like, what on earth? Like, really? But a lot of that you can look at as protected parts connected to exiles, right? And so
Yeah.
that's how I would understand even that man's behavior, which by many standards is outrageous, is a protected part of him protect another part of him. Now, unfortunately, he also has power, and he has access to power, and the way he's using it is the way he's using it.
Mhm.
But that's an example of there's nothing wrong with him per se, right? But he does have extreme hurt and extreme protectors trying to compensate. That's
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I both, in my clinical work, it has changed how I literally see my clients in this the second they sit down, right? And I'm
Yep.
kinda looking for parts and I'm hearing parts, and a lot of times they come in and the parts are going like this, right? Or
Yeah.
there's 5 or 6 that I've heard from in the first 40 seconds they wanna tell me
Yeah.
everything, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, they wanna please me and all this, and it's like, "Okay, yeah, wow, we've got a lot of parts here." But also just in my life, it has given me a slightly different worldview to your point on Trump, and just seeing people, uh, differently, right? Seeing them and thinking about their parts, right? And
Uh-huh.
that they are not that. That is a part of them, but they are not that is profoundly humanizing, right? If there's people in my life that bother me, right? Or it's like, I just don't know
Uh-huh.
why that person just bothers me.
Right.
Um, in my training, again, 10 years of working psychodynamically, it's like, well, I have some transference issue and it's about me and my unresolved BS. And it probably has to do with my dad. And I got to work on that. And it kind of ends there in a way, right? Of
Right.
like, I feel shame for having transference, right? Whereas IFS
Uh-huh.
takes a very different stance on what you guys would call, transference. So maybe you can speak more to that too. And even as therapists, are working with have parts up in a session, with
Yeah.
a client. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me
Or someone
speak
in their
to
personal life. Yeah.
let me speak to this session because there's a piece here that I like to teach as well. It's important for me. Um, I'm part of the College of Social Work in Ontario, Canada, and they put out a quarterly publication. And in the in the centerfold of this quarterly publication, at the top of the page, there's a hammer and a gavel, like a judge's thing, and there's all these judgments on therapists that have transgressed. And I mean, for me, I know the rules. I don't need to
Yeah.
see, and it reads a bit like really cheesy therapist porn because they're like, by the third session, so and so put their hand on the knee of the client. They said it was to reassure them. By the fifth session, the hand was sliding up their thigh. I really
Hmm.
don't want to read this, but a part of me finds it compelling. But what's going on here? If you ask most therapists, for example, do you ever sexualize a client? Do you ever feel sexually attracted to a client? The response will usually be, no, I'm a professional, right? That is a part.
Mm.
Of course, if somebody hot walks into your office, you're going to have a part that goes, woo, right? You just are. That's how we are, right? The difference with IFS is if I notice that part of me, I would say, yeah, I know. Hey, such a shame we're meeting in this context because it means we can't act on it, right? We're not in a bar or a coffee shop or at a party. And I know that's hard for you because you think he's hot, right? So yeah, it's hard. And then it will pull back and it will kind of sulk a bit, but it'll pull back. And now I am doing the therapeutic work. If, however, I'm saying I would never have a part that sexualize a client, this part will go, oh, good, I can sneak in under that idiot's radar. And that's where something like sexual abuse of clients and the abuse of the therapeutic dyad happens. And it's so wrong ethically and morally, and it does so much damage to the client. And it's not necessary. If we could just acknowledge that within our humanity, there is a part that might find a particular client sexy. Let's just acknowledge it and then not act from it because it's just a part. That in itself could do so much good for a profession that, I mean, we all know the scandals in this profession, and it's damaging to clients, it's damaging to the
Yeah.
profession, and it's absolutely not necessary. So that's one example that I obviously feel
Yeah.
quite strongly about. Right? So,
Well, again, my kind of therapist part translates things from psychodynamics into IFS now. And so thinking about kind of like, the role of suppression, right? Or of like, I have a thought that the client's attractive and I need to work really hard to get rid of that thought or suppress
right.
it, right? And then I feel kind of bad about it. And like, what kind of therapist am I? What kind of monster am I, right?
Uh-huh, uh-huh,
And that is just almost exactly the opposite of what you just walked us through,
uh-huh.
right?
Yeah,
Which
yeah,
is like, of course, that part is feeling some attraction. Oh yeah, that makes sense. And you're feeling that. Yeah, I get it. You can just hang out and
yeah,
see how
yeah,
the session goes, and you're bringing your parts along for the ride.
yeah,
But just like if you were trying to get anyone in your life to like change, we don't get people to change by shaming them, by guilting them, right? By
right.
coming at them, by going, why are you doing that, right? Why are you being attracted again? You know,
Uh-huh.
we have a lot at stake here. And it's like, then the part feels shame or they come back twice as strong, right? And I find that's very true. Like to me, it's also
Yeah,
why like things like interventions don't really work. You have 10 people coming and going, hey, you're an addict and you need to stop, right? Or whatever. And then that, you might kind of manage that, I don't know, quell that part for 30, 60, or 90 days or whatever, and then it comes back twice as strong, or people relapse or whatever it is. So I just see all that in a different way now, seeing the world and my clinical work through an IFS lens.
that's great. Yeah, it's a great example. And like in the recovery community, they have this term, the white knuckle drunk, right?
Yeah.
And what that means is you can go to the party, but you're clenching your fists the whole time. You will not drink because the manager parts can make sure you don't, but you're not comfortable. You have to leave by 9 o'clock because you're so stressed out.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. I mean, if your goal is to not drink, you can do it for a period of time, right? But if you come to the drinking part and say, hey, how come you're drinking? Oh, you're connected to a part that gets socially anxious. Okay, maybe we could get to know that one. Oh, that one tracks back to your first day in the playground when you got beaten up by the other kids and they laughed at you and you felt like you couldn't handle social situations. Great. Let's get that 5-year-old out of there. All right, let's help that one out. Let's hear its story. Then no more social anxiety, no more habitual need to drink. Now, addiction is a bit complex because if it's been going on for years or decades, it becomes an habituated response and it takes a bit more work. It's not that straightforward. But those are the essential dynamics around parts that will use substances because there are other parts that they're connected to that are feeling distress. And not to say that everyone that has a drink has an XL part. That's not it at all. But if it's habituated and it feels compelled, any behavior that feels compelled, you're looking at a part that's holding distress. So the compelled people pleaser, the compelled drinker, it's essentially the same, right? It's being
Yeah.
compelled by another part that we can help.
I want to come back to this and also the role of trauma in our parts.
Mhm.
I also just want to take a moment, number one, to tell the folks that are here live watching, if you have questions for Derek, we got about 10 minutes left. Please ask them in the chat. I'll bring them up one by one, and we'll see if Derek can kind of talk us through them. I also want to give Derek just give you a second to let people know exactly how you help people learn IFS, how you help therapists, and of course where they can go to learn about your programs, and then we'll keep talking.
Sure. Thanks, John. Yeah. So if you're curious about any of this, you can go to my website, ifsca.ca. It's pretty straightforward. I offer a 4-month course which teaches mental health professionals, the one you're in, John, how to really get this model so that you can you have practice sessions, there are consult groups, there are didactic teachings, and by the end of the course, you'll have a sense of how you can operate therapeutically from your own what we call self. And it's funny, John, because I know your work has been about helping therapists build their practice. IFS is the emerging paradigm in mental health. And so if you train in this modality and you get good at it, your practice will be full within 2 years because people will
Yeah.
refer to you and they'll refer their friends and family to you. So, and you're not tired at the end of the day. You do not burn out with IFS because you are not responsible for the client. You can't be. It makes no sense. The other option for anyone is to go to my YouTube channel. I think it's Derek Scott YouTube or IFSCA YouTube. If you Google that, you'll find me. Whole bunch of free videos, right? Especially I designed a lot of them for people that cannot afford therapy, but want to learn how to do this for themselves. So please visit the YouTube channel if you'd like to do that. Thanks, John.
Great. Yeah, and the program has been amazing for me so far. It's very experiential, so we're also practicing IFS
Mhm.
with one another, which is perhaps the best way to learn. It's also for myself and some of the folks in my practice groups, the first time we've done therapy in front of anyone in 10 years. So we naturally had parts up around that, right? I had
Uh-huh.
this kind of 17-year-old part who almost like reading in front of the classroom,
Uh-huh.
being a teenager and fumbling through it, or
Yeah.
feeling embarrassed or whatever it is. And a lot of parts up around, what if these people judge me? What if they think I'm a terrible therapist, right? And then
Uh-huh.
of course it's like, okay, work with that, right? And learning to work with our own
Yep.
systems is just such a huge part of the training, which I so appreciate. And
Good.
it's not easy, and IFS, one of my martial arts instructors used to say, simple but not easy, simple but not easy. And I think
Uh-huh.
some of that comes up with me, even just practicing the 6 Fs. It's like simple but not easy, or not easy to do it
Uh-huh.
smoothly, with clients, and while also working with your own system.
But what you're doing, John, is you're learning the nuances of the work, which is so important. A lot of
Mhm.
people, a lot of therapists will read books on IFS and think they can do it, and they can't, and it doesn't work. So
No, not at all.
once you've got the nuances, it's like, oh, that's what's going to make you an excellent IFS informed therapist. So
And people's systems are so different, right? Some
right.
clients sit down and right away you're working with parts and you're going deep, and there's an unburdening on the table. Other clients, you step in and it's It's chaotic. Parts are very up. It moves very fast, and it's hard to
Mhm.
even get them to work with one part. At the end of the session, you walk away going, "I'm not sure if we got anywhere today." Um, to your point about the burnout piece, I want to say that has very much been my experience. And after my year and a half sabbatical, coming back and primarily using IFS with my clients, um, a few weeks ago, I saw 6 clients in a day, which is really the most I would ever see.
Mhm.
And I came home and I kind of told my wife, I said, um, I know you're not going to believe this, but I feel great. I feel just like I did in the morning when I
Yeah.
started.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she's astounded, right? And like, I'm
Yeah.
ready to go. I've got kids stuff to do. I got a 3-year-old, or I can hang out with my wife, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Whereas the last 10 years, it's like 6 sessions and she knows I need to be in the basement alone, like with my headphones on for at least 2 hours before I can even like talk to her, right? It's just
Yeah.
psychically, just so much to take on. And so, whereas now, it truly is between clients parts and self, right? And that self
Uh-huh.
the parts connection, and that has just been such a tremendous relief that I don't have all the answers. So they come in and they go, I'm thinking about breaking up with my partner, and do you think I should? And they just bring that on you and they put it in your
Uh-huh.
lap, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
whatever it is, or that I need to be their attachment figure to
Mhm.
help them resolve
Mhm.
some relational trauma or whatever it is. So yeah.
And after a good IFS session, here's an example, right? 23-year-old young woman in an emotionally abusive relationship. She believes she deserves it. She doesn't deserve anything else. She learned that in the family of origin because her dad was neglectful and abusive of her. And so she's, her self-esteem's in the toilet. She has a session where she realizes that that's a 6-year-old girl that's been getting her attention, who feels like she's unlovable. She helps that part out. Once that part's helped out, I hear her say, "You know what? I'm better than this. I'm going to leave that guy." Right? We end the session. I put on Cher because I'm an aging fag, and I dance around the kitchen. Right? It's like that was a great session because she did her own work, which I guided her to, and the joy that becomes available in doing the work is just remarkable. So yeah,
Yeah.
no burnout here.
Yeah, no, that's huge. We got about 5 minutes left. I just want to, again, if anyone has questions from the chat about IFS or anything Derek's talked about. If not, I could probably prompt Derek with another
Yeah.
another question. Maybe for now, Derek, I'm primarily a trauma therapist. I've done EMDR since 2016 or so, and I train our therapists here at the practice. Can you say a little bit about the role of trauma in our parts, or typically how parts work is looks a little different when there's trauma or even complex trauma?
Yeah, that's a lot to go into in 4 minutes. So let me just speak to what you'll find most commonly with trauma. What's happened with trauma usually is a child has been hurt by an adult, if it's interpersonal trauma. Adults are meant to nurture children. We are not meant to be hurt by adults. We're the only mammalian species that makes war on its own children. And so that system learns that adults are not safe, people are not safe. So that system is not going to open up to you just because you call yourself a trauma therapist. No matter what you have on your wall, you're not safe. So it's going to take quite a while for that system to determine that you are safe. That system will put you through tests to see if you can consistently be there, because that's not been the experience. And the protectors, you'll be meeting the protective system a lot in clients with trauma. So you just hang in with the protective system, let it know that you get how important it is to dissociate. You get how important it is to be angry. You get how important it is to be self-effacing. However the protectors are presenting, you let them know that you respect them and you get what they're doing and why they're doing it. And over time, the protective system will begin to consider allowing you or allowing the client's self to come into the parts that are holding the trauma material. And we do that in a way that's safe. We can titrate the trauma material so it doesn't overwhelm, it doesn't all come at once. And we can facilitate healing from trauma in that way. Complex trauma is, by definition, a bit more complex, and we don't have time to go
Yeah.
into that right now. If you're working with the MDR, which is not a system based on multiplicity, if you let the protective system know what you're going to do, you're basically going to bypass them and access some trauma material, and you get them on board, or you ask them how that is for them. if the protective system feels respected as you go in with the
Mhm.
EMDR work, you'll get much less backlash and much more of a successful outcome with the EMDR when you combine it with IFS. They can work very well together.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's well said, and I gave you an impossible question here with, 4 minutes left. I also find that in the case of clients with a lot of trauma that the protectors are, like you said, quite polarized. Also, they can be quite angry.
Oh, yes.
And sometimes clients and me are a little surprised to stumble into that, especially if it's a client that presents as kind of quiet or meek or kind of scared, right? And then you
Mhm,
have a
mhm,
protector that's up and it's really angry, right? Or it's the first time the
mhm.
client's self has ever met this protector, and sometimes
Right.
that first meeting can be intense. And
Yeah.
so again, back to the therapist, right? It's like working with my own system and going really slow with folks as we step into to their system, and also
Mhm.
because their parts are checking me out too and wondering,
Of course.
is this guy okay, right?
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
it okay for me to come out? Um can can the people in the room handle my anger, right? And
yeah.
oftentimes they have very good reasons as to why they are the way they are, right?
Uh-huh. Well, and also I think, I have angry parts that come up around children that have been hurt, right? I've got parts that are
Hmm.
just, currently what's happening in Gaza, that the children that are being children are being killed. Like, what is that?
Hmm.
And I have parts tremendously sad about that, and also parts that are just really angry about that, and parts that get very angry about the hurt that's been visited on some of my trauma clients. And my work is to acknowledge those parts of me because they're great parts to have, and then ask them to pull back so I can be present with the client in the way they need me to be, which is
Yeah.
not me being angry or me being sad. It's me holding my compassion for them. And
Yeah.
that's the work of the IFS therapist, really. Get your own parts out of the way so that
Mm.
you can be present for the client, and then to be able to facilitate their healing from that place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Just about a minute left here, Derek. I'm just being mindful of time. We have one question. We've already kind of touched on it a little bit, and I know this is a bigger can of worms for IFS at large now as it gains popularity at an incredible rate. I've personally never seen anything like it
Mhm.
in the demand for IFS training. But Anne on YouTube asks best resources for becoming proficient at IFS.
You need to be in a program where you're practicing the model. That's the key piece. Now, if you can get into the IFS Institute, that's good. They're level one training, but they have thousands of applicants, and they do a lottery. Some people have been entering the lottery for 8 years.
Yeah.
There's my program, Stepping Stone. People that have taken that and the level one tell me they regard them as being the same. That's from their
Hmm.
perspective. Any program you can get into where you get supervised practice, and that's the key piece. So a lot of the courses that are around PESI or the online circle, they're recordings. You don't get that lived experience, and if you're not practicing, you can't become aware of your own parts and the challenges, as you named, John, that come up. So the Stepping Stone course has availability right now for January if people want to sign up for that. But yeah, anything that
Great.
offers supervised practice from credible folk is what you want to be doing. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. And again, Derek's not paying me to say this, but I'm part of his Stepping Stones program, and it's wonderful. It's a really great blend of didactic, so teaching just
Mm,
enough, but then letting us try it, right, and work in practice groups and be the client and be the therapist and be an observer, right, and then we get our questions answered the next week in a consulting group. It's just a really nice flow of practice and learning.
mm.
Um, so it's been incredible for me. So if folks are interested, I would say jump on it sooner than later because mine filled up really fast when I
Yeah,
signed up. And
they tend to. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So next one's starting in January, as Derek said, ifsca.ca to learn more about Stepping Stones program. I've got a link to Derek's YouTube channel here in the chat. I'll also put it in the description. And yeah, make sure to check out his channel and subscribe there as well, and reach out if you're interested in one of his programs. So, Derek, I can't thank you enough for being here. Just getting us started in this new chapter of our show over here. So it's been really wonderful. I can't think of a better teacher to come and warm us up to learning about IFS. So thank you again.
I appreciate the invite. Thanks, John. I'll
All
see you.
right. Thanks, Derek. See everyone. Have a good week.
Bye.
Bye.